Margaret's going to start by telling you a little bit about attachment in general.
All right. So, actually, when we think of attachment, we often think of what the baby's relationship to a parent is. But really, attachment is a relationship between two people, the baby and its caretaker. And it gets initiated by the parent. And women begin to speculate about their babies to be very early in pregnancy. They get increasingly interested in the baby to be after quickening, when they can feel the baby move. And by the time the baby is born, they already have the beginnings of an attachment towards their newborn. The first couple of months of a baby's life are spent by parents taking care, physical care of babies. So they're interested in how much they eat, how often they eat, when they sleep, when they wake up, whether their diapers need changing, and so forth and so on. But as they engage in these activities, it's really very hardwired into us as human beings that we don't do this as if we were robots. So we smile at babies, we talk to them, even newborns. We tell them what we're going to do. We interpret their squeaks and coos and giggles and noises so that we begin to try and read the baby's emotion and develop a connection.
I'm a specialist in women's mental health, and so I treat a lot of people who have postpartum depression or other kinds of postpartum illnesses. And it makes it incredibly hard to feel attached in a healthy way to the baby. Almost everybody experiences what's called postpartum blues. There are statistics that show up to 95% of women will struggle in the days immediately postpartum till about 2 weeks we think it's because of the hormonal plummeting. Things are changing so much. You've got all this estrogen and progesterone that's been built up during pregnancy. A few days after you deliver, it just drops down. You're practically menopausal. And that really affects your emotionality. You become very sensitive. A lot of people cry at the drop of a hat, and that happens to almost everybody, and it does not require intervention, treatment, nothing. It really requires just reassurance. However, if that goes on past a couple of weeks and the emotionality gets deeper and more entrenched, what you find is that you could be developing into a postpartum depression. So if you have a mother who's depressed and they're with a newborn who needs, as Margaret is saying, this kind of loving interaction where you're responding to the baby's gurgles and coos, you can see that there would be a problem that begins right away because the mom herself is depressed, unable to, sleep so well, eat so well, can't concentrate, no energy, feeling hopeless, feeling helpless, not feeling connected to the baby. Those are all signs and symptoms of depression. Now, you'll note that not sleeping, not eating, not concentrating, those are actually normal parts of the
taking
postpartum.
care of a baby.
Right, and taking
baby.
care of a child. So that can be confusing. You can think, oh, is this just the regular postpartum, or is this in fact postpartum depression? But if you're feeling like you can't connect to the baby, or you don't care, or you just want to escape, I've had many moms say to me, I just wish I could check into a hotel and forget about this, but yet they wanted this baby the entire pregnancy.
Mothers come home from the hospital and they are tired.
Exhausted.
So that things like when the baby wakes up in the middle of the night, bringing the baby to mom to nurse if she's nursing, or and then taking the baby and changing the diaper before you put it down often can be very helpful, or perhaps feeding.
The first 2 weeks in particular can be an emotional roller coaster. As long as you know that and it's not so alarming, I think getting your expectations in line will be helpful.
That can formally measure attachment by systematically separating mother and baby for brief periods of time, and then focusing on what happened when they finally were able to get back together again after a brief separation. And about 80% of babies usually will greet the mother when she comes back, and makes this was useful to try with babies between 12 and 18 months. We'll greet the mother and try and share with her some of the things that were going on in her absence. So they'll bring the toy that they were playing with over to show her, or they'll point to something in the room that particularly interested them.
The best thing you can do is encourage that mother to get help and to take care of herself and to get treatment, which is readily available if you can identify the problem and get to somebody who can help you. Treatment can be with therapy, with medications, support groups, or any number of ways to do it. It's not so hard to treat. Postpartum Support International is an amazing grassroots organization that I'm a part of. They are online. They offer all kinds of free services, and it's really about getting the mother well. So everybody else can encourage and drag the mom to treatment, because sometimes you don't even have the motivation to help yourself when you're so depressed. But I think that's how friends and family can be helpful. And being depressed postpartum is a real thing. And sometimes I have to educate families to say, she's not just falling down on the job here. This is not her fault. It's a biological condition that's very complicated and needs treatment.
Adoption usually is a long process, often longer than pregnancy, so that they are involved in planning for the coming of this child, even if the mother is not carrying it herself. And after that, I think the development of an attachment relationship, which cuts both ways, follows pretty much the same pattern as attachment to babies that are delivered by their care, those who care for them afterwards.
Different generations have thought breastfeeding was the only thing to do. Other generations have thought, formula feeding and bottle feeding was the only thing to do. I think we all turned out fairly well, despite whatever was in fashion at the time. I know there's a huge push now for breastfeeding exclusively. It used to be 6 months, then it went to a year.
And sometimes
longer.
longer.
There's a lot of push to have it go longer. This makes me a little bit unhappy, because I feel like you really have to take the individual into consideration. There's no rule. So when I see a mom in my office who is breastfeeding a baby but is so incredibly depressed or disconnected, but she's breastfeeding the baby and looking out the window, and you couldn't care less, not because she feels that way, but because that's her biology at that time, I think to myself, oh my gosh, you would have been so much better off to have another caregiver giving the baby formula, who could have a loving relationship interaction. You could get help, whether it's through medication or psychotherapy. You can still breastfeed. I mean, you can do both, but really, I just don't think it's so important to say one is better than the other.
Gazelle, who was one of the first who did his work describing normal development beginning in the 1920s, had a lovely way of describing the beginning establishment of this hierarchy, and he says it's usually the one who feeds him. So the one who provides a lot, meets first the basic biologic needs, usually is the person on top of this hierarchy. But the distinctions between the people on the hierarchy, if they're all part of the close family, are very, they're small.
Thank you very much for joining us today. And we thank the Huffington Post's Living section for doing something like this, which hopefully has been an educational experience. And you can go to www.earlymomentsmatter.org if you want to learn more about, get the toolkit and learn more about attachment. And we wish a happy Mother's Day to everybody out there. Mother's Day is coming up this weekend. And just remember, it's never too late, and individual experiences are really where you can focus. There's no right or wrong, very little right or wrong.
Yes.
So good luck to everybody. Thank you for tuning in.
Thank you. And thank you for the interesting and thoughtful questions.
Excellent questions.